Rachel sat in her old car outside the bank, staring at the piece of paper in her hands. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from pure fear. The eviction notice was clear as day. She had 72 hours to come up with $1,200 or she'd be homeless. 72 hours. 3 days. That was it. She picked up her phone and opened her banking app for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The number hadn't changed. $1,047. That was everything she had left in this world. 6 months without a job will do that to you. 6 months of sending out resumes and getting nothing back. 6 months of watching her savings disappear dollar by dollar, day by day. And then there were her mom's medical bills. Stage 3 cancer doesn't care about your bank account. It doesn't care that you're already drowning. The treatments, the medications, the endless hospital visits. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Rachel closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She'd done the math 1,000 times. Even if she gave her landlord every penny she had, it still wouldn't be enough. She'd still be short. And then what? Where would she go? Her mom was too sick to take her in. Her friends were barely getting by themselves. She'd be on the street. The October wind rattled her car windows. She could see her breath in the cold air. The heater in her car had stopped working 2 weeks ago. Just another thing she couldn't afford to fix. Another problem she had to ignore because there were bigger problems screaming for attention. She grabbed her worn purse and opened the car door. The cold hit her like a slap in the face. She pulled her thin jacket tighter and started walking toward the bank. Maybe she could talk to them. Maybe she could beg for an extension. Maybe they'd have some program she didn't know about. Maybe. Her eyes were so blurred with tears that she almost didn't see him. She stumbled, catching herself at the last second. There, leaning against the bank's brick wall, was a man. He was older, maybe in his 50s, though it was hard to tell. Life on the streets ages you fast. He wore an old military jacket, the kind with patches and faded colors that told stories if you knew how to read them. It hung loose on his thin frame, like it had been bought when he was a different person, a healthier person. Next to him was a piece of cardboard with words written in shaky handwriting. Homeless veteran. Anything helps, God bless. Rachel wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, something stopped her cold. His eyes. They were empty in a way that scared her. Not angry or demanding, just hollow. Like he'd seen things no person should ever have to see. Like he'd given up on the world giving a damn about him. Sorry, ma'am, he said quietly. His voice was rough, like every word hurt to push out. I didn't mean to be in your way. She shook her head. No, you're fine. I just wasn't watching where I was going. She should have kept walking. She knew that. She had her own disaster waiting for her. Her own countdown to homelessness. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the way his hands were shaking. Trembling so badly he had to clench them together to make it stop. Maybe it was the blue tint to his lips from the cold. Maybe it was the way he kept trying to pull that thin jacket tighter, like it could somehow protect him from the freezing October morning. I'm sorry to bother you, he said again. It's just, I haven't eaten in 3 days. If you could spare any change, even $1, I'd be grateful. 3 days. Rachel's stomach twisted. She'd been worried about where she'd sleep in 72 hours. This man hadn't eaten in 3 days. Right now, not in the future. Right now he was starving. What's your name? The question came out before she could stop it. He looked surprised that anyone was actually talking to him. David, ma'am. David Thompson. I served in Afghanistan. 2 tours. His voice cracked when he said it, and Rachel saw something flash in those empty eyes. Pride, maybe. Or the memory of pride. Of a time when he mattered. When people thanked him instead of stepping over him. Rachel looked down and noticed the bracelet on his wrist, half hidden by his sleeve. A hospital bracelet from the VA. How long had he been wearing that? How long had he been out here? Forgotten by the same country he'd served. Her father's voice echoed in her head. He'd been gone 5 years now, but she could still hear him clear as day. Baby girl, he used to say. Real character isn't about what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when nobody's looking. When it costs you something. That's when you find out who you really are. Rachel looked at David, then at the bank behind him, then back at David. Her heart was pounding. She was thinking something crazy. Something that made absolutely no sense. Something that went against every survival instinct she had. She had $1,047. It wasn't enough to save her apartment. Even if she gave it all to her landlord right now, she'd still be short. She'd still be evicted. The math was simple and brutal, but it could save this man. Right now, today. David, she heard herself say, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, okay? Confusion crossed his weathered face. Ma'am, you don't have to. Just wait here, please. Rachel walked into the bank before she could change her mind. Her legs felt like they didn't belong to her, like she was watching someone else walk through those glass doors, someone braver than she'd ever been, someone stupid enough to give away their last hope. The bank was warm inside, too warm, or maybe it was just her. She walked up to the teller, a young guy who looked barely out of college. He smiled at her professionally. How can I help you today? I need to withdraw $1,000 cash. Sure thing. Just need to see your ID. Her hands shook as she handed it over. The teller didn't notice. Why would he? He processed transactions like this all day. He had no idea he was helping her commit financial suicide. He had no idea she was about to give away the only thing standing between her and the street. He counted out the bills. 10 stacks of $100. It looked like so much money when it was all spread out like that. It looked like salvation, like possibility, like it could fix something. Here you go. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Rachel shook her head, unable to speak. She took the money, stuffed it in her purse, and walked back outside. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. David was still there. His head was down now, chin tucked against his chest, trying to stay warm. He hadn't expected her to come back. She could tell. People probably promised him things all the time and never followed through. Why would she be different? Rachel walked over and knelt down beside him. The concrete was cold and rough through her jeans. She reached into her purse and pulled out the cash. All of it. $1,000, David, she said softly. He looked up, and when he saw what was in her hands, his eyes went wide. Ma'am, what are you? This is for you. She pressed the bills into his trembling hands. All of it. Get somewhere warm tonight. Get food, please. Get whatever you need. David stared at the money like it was a hallucination, like it might disappear if he blinked. I can't, he whispered. This is too much. You don't understand what you're doing. I can't take this from you. Yes, you can, Rachel said, and she was crying now. Full-on crying. Tears running down her face in the cold morning air. You served our country. You protected people like me. And now you're out here freezing and starving, and that's not right. That's not okay. Someone should have helped you a long time ago. But you need this, David said. And now he was crying too. I can see it in your eyes. You need this money. Rachel smiled through her tears. Yeah, I do. But you know what? I'll figure something out. I always do. But right now, in this moment, you need it more than I do. So please take it. Take care of yourself. She stood up quickly before he could argue anymore, before she could change her mind, before the logical part of her brain could scream loud enough to make her take it back. She walked toward her car, not looking back, her vision blurred with tears. Her hands were still shaking when she got behind the wheel. She sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd just given away her last hope, her last safety net. In 72 hours, she'd be homeless too. But somehow, impossibly, she felt lighter, like a weight had lifted off her chest, like for the first time in 6 months, she'd done something that mattered, something real, something true. She looked at David through her rearview mirror. He was still sitting there, staring at the money in his hands, tears running down his face. And in that moment, Rachel knew she'd made the right choice, even if it cost her everything. Rachel sat in her car, staring at nothing. Her phone was in her lap, but she couldn't bring herself to pick it up. She knew what she had to do. She had to call her landlord. She had to tell him she couldn't pay rent. She had to start the conversation that would end with her packing up everything she owned and what, going where? The tears had dried on her face, leaving tight tracks on her cheeks. She felt numb now, empty, like she'd used up every emotion she had and there was nothing left inside her except a strange kind of peace. A terrifying peace. What had she done? The question kept circling in her mind like a bird that couldn't find a place to land. She'd given away $1,000 to a complete stranger. Money she desperately needed. Money that was supposed to at least buy her time to figure things out. And now it was gone. Just gone. She glanced in the rearview mirror. David was still there, sitting against the bank wall. But he looked different now. He wasn't hunched over anymore. He was sitting up straight, holding that money like it was made of glass, like it might break if he wasn't careful. And he was crying. She could see his shoulders shaking. Rachel's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had cried because she'd done something kind? When was the last time she'd made that kind of difference in someone's life? Her phone buzzed. A text message from her landlord. Need to hear from you today about the rent. No more extensions. Her stomach dropped. She picked up the phone with shaking hands and started typing a response. Then deleted it. Started again. Deleted it again. What could she say? Sorry. I gave my rent money to a homeless veteran because it felt like the right thing to do. That sounded insane. That was insane. But she'd meant what she'd told David. She'd figure something out. She always did. Somehow, some way, she'd survived every other impossible situation in her life. She'd figure this one out too. She had to believe that, because if she didn't believe that, she'd fall apart completely. She typed out a simple message. Can we please talk tomorrow? I need one more day. She hit send before she could overthink it. The response came back almost immediately. This is the last time. Tomorrow noon. Final answer. Rachel set her phone down and closed her eyes. One more day. She had one more day to come up with $1,200. Might as well be $1 million. Might as well be asking her to fly to the moon. A tap on her window made her jump. Her heart nearly exploded out of her chest. She turned to see an older woman standing beside her car. The woman was well-dressed, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and an expensive-looking coat. Rachel rolled down her window. Yes? I'm sorry to bother you, the woman said. But I was inside the bank just now. I saw what you did for that veteran out there. Rachel's face went hot. It was nothing. Nothing? The woman's eyebrows went up. Honey, I heard you withdraw $1,000. And then I watched you give every bit of it to that man. That's not nothing. Rachel didn't know what to say. She felt exposed, like someone had caught her doing something she should be ashamed of. But she wasn't ashamed. Terrified, yes. Questioning her sanity, absolutely. But not ashamed. I just thought he needed it more than I did, Rachel said quietly. The woman studied her face for a long moment. You're in trouble yourself, aren't you? Financial trouble? Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. She was so tired of crying. Yeah, I am. But it's okay. I'll figure it out. You're a good person, the woman said. Better than most people I meet. Better than most people I know, and I know a lot of people. What you did back there, that took real courage. Or real stupidity, Rachel said with a bitter laugh. Sometimes those two things look the same, the woman said with a small smile. Look, I don't know you, and you don't know me. But I believe that good things happen to good people. Maybe not right away, maybe not in the way we expect. But eventually the universe balances things out. You remember that, okay? Before Rachel could respond, the woman walked away, heading to a sleek black car parked a few spaces down. Rachel watched her drive off, wondering if she'd just imagined that whole conversation. The universe balances things out. What kind of fairy tale was that? Rachel looked at the clock on her dashboard. 30 minutes had passed since she'd given David the money. 30 minutes of sitting here spiraling, questioning everything. She needed to go home. She needed to start making calls. Maybe she could get a payday loan. Maybe she could sell some stuff. Maybe she could beg family members she hadn't talked to in years. She was about to start the car when she heard sirens, distant at first, then getting closer. She looked around, trying to figure out where they were coming from. Then she saw them. 3 black SUVs. The kind that government officials rode in, turning into the bank parking lot with purpose. Rachel's heart started pounding again. What was happening? Was the bank being robbed? Should she leave? She reached for her keys, but something made her pause. The SUVs weren't moving like there was an emergency. They were moving with precision, like they knew exactly where they were going. They pulled up right in front of the bank, right where David was sitting. Men in dark suits got out first. They looked like Secret Service agents from a movie. Serious faces, earpieces, eyes scanning everything. And then from the middle SUV, a man stepped out who made Rachel's breath catch. He was tall and imposing, wearing a full military dress uniform. Not the regular kind. This was the fancy kind, with medals covering his chest and stars on his shoulders. 4 stars. Rachel didn't know much about military ranks, but she knew 4 stars meant this was someone important. Really important, the general, because that's obviously what he was, stood there for a moment, looking at David. His face was hard to read from this distance, stern, intense, almost angry. Rachel's stomach twisted into knots. Oh God, had she gotten David in trouble? Was it illegal to give money to veterans on the street? Had she messed up somehow? She'd been trying to help, but what if she'd made things worse? She watched, frozen, as the general walked straight toward David. David was looking up now, his eyes wide with confusion and something that looked like recognition. The money Rachel had given him was still clutched in his hands. The general stopped right in front of David. Rachel could see David trying to struggle to his feet, trying to show respect to this obviously high-ranking officer, but his legs were shaky and he stumbled. The general reached out, catching him, steadying him, and then something happened that Rachel would never forget as long as she lived. The general's stern expression crumbled. Just collapsed like a building falling down, and then he dropped to his knees on the dirty concrete right there in his expensive uniform, and pulled David into a hug, a real hug, the kind where you hold on like you're afraid to let go. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth. What was happening? Who was David? How did he know this general? Other people in the parking lot had stopped what they were doing. A small crowd was forming, everyone trying to figure out what was going on. Rachel got out of her car without thinking, drawn toward the scene like everyone else. She could hear the general talking now, his voice carrying across the parking lot. David Thompson? Is it really you? David's voice was shaky, confused. General Hartwell? Sir, I don't understand. I've been looking for you, the general said. And his voice was thick with emotion. Real emotion. This powerful, important man was barely holding it together. 8 months, David, 8 months I've been trying to find you. Where have you been? David looked overwhelmed, like he couldn't process what was happening. Sir, I got lost. In the system. I didn't know where. One of the men in suits was on his phone, talking rapidly. Another was already pulling out what looked like a medical kit. They were preparing for something. Rachel didn't know what, but they clearly had a plan. The general helped David to his feet, keeping a steadying hand on his shoulder. Someone saw what happened here 30 minutes ago, the general said. A witness called our emergency hotline. They said a woman gave her last money to a homeless veteran. They managed to get a photo of you, David. When that photo hit my desk 15 minutes ago, I dropped everything. Everything, do you understand? David was crying openly now. Sir, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disappear. I couldn't. No, the general said firmly. No apologies. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Do you understand me, soldier? Rachel stood at the edge of the growing crowd, her heart hammering. She felt like she'd stumbled into a movie, like she'd accidentally become part of some story much bigger than herself. A woman next to her whispered, "What's going on? Who is that homeless guy?" "I don't know," someone else answered. "But that's a 4-star general. That's one of the highest ranks in the military. Whatever this is, it's big." The general turned to his aides. "Get medical here now. I want him checked out immediately. And I want a full debrief on how he ended up on the street. I want names. I want to know where the system failed him. And then I want those failures fixed." "Understood?" "Yes, sir," one of the aides said, already making calls. The general turned back to David. "Do you still have the money that woman gave you?" David nodded, holding it up with shaking hands. "She gave me everything. She said I needed it more than she did." "Where is she?" the general asked, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Where's the woman who helped you?" Rachel felt everyone's eyes turning, looking around. She should step forward. She should say something. But she was frozen, her feet stuck to the pavement. The woman who'd talked to her earlier, the one who'd told her the universe balances things out, suddenly pointed. "That's her. The young woman over there. I saw her do it." Every eye turned to Rachel. The general's gaze locked onto hers, and she felt like he could see right through her, see every fear, every desperate thought, every ounce of doubt she'd felt in the last 30 minutes. "You," he said, walking toward her with purpose. "What's your name?" Rachel's voice came out as barely a whisper. Rachel Chen." The general stood in front of her now, his presence overwhelming. "Ms. Chen, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest. How much money did you give David?" $1,000, she said. "It was everything I had." "Everything?" The general's eyes narrowed. "You mean everything in your wallet?" "No," Rachel said, and she was crying again. "Everything I had in the world. It was my last $1,000. The general's jaw tightened. He turned to one of his aides. Checker. Run a financial check right now. Sir, the aide said, we can't just... That's an order. The aide pulled out a tablet and started typing rapidly. The general turned back to Rachel. Why did you do it? Why did you give everything you had to a stranger? Rachel wiped her eyes. Because he needed it. Because nobody else was helping him. Because it was the right thing to do. Even though it cost you everything? Especially because it cost me everything, Rachel said. Otherwise, it wouldn't have meant anything. The general stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small one. But it changed his entire face. Sir, the aide said quietly, holding up the tablet. She's telling the truth. She's facing eviction. She has $47 left in her account. That $1,000 was literally everything she had. The general nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. He looked back at David, then at Rachel, then back at David again. Ms. Chen, he said, you have no idea what you just did, no idea who you just saved, and you're about to find out that the universe works in ways that don't make sense until you look back on them. Rachel didn't understand what he meant. She didn't understand any of this. All she knew was that she'd tried to do something good, and somehow, impossibly, it had spiraled into something much bigger than she could have imagined. The general turned to his team. I want Ms. Chen's information protected. I want updates on her situation. And I want to know everything about how David ended up on that street corner. He looked back at Rachel one more time. Don't go anywhere. We're not done here. Not by a long shot. Rachel stood there feeling like the world had tilted sideways. She watched as paramedics appeared from somewhere, checking David's vital signs, wrapping him in thermal blankets, asking him questions in gentle voices. The whole parking lot had become some kind of command center, and she was stuck right in the middle of it, not understanding what was happening. General Hartwell was on his phone, his voice low but intense. She caught pieces of what he was saying. Words like confirmed, location secured, and full medical evaluation. Whatever this was, it was serious. Really serious. A young woman in a suit approached Rachel. She had kind eyes but a professional demeanor that made it clear she was used to being in control. Ms. Chen, I'm Lieutenant Morrison. I need you to come with me for a few minutes, please. The general wants to speak with you privately. Rachel's heart jumped. Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Lieutenant Morrison's expression softened. No, ma'am. You're not in any trouble. Quite the opposite, actually. But there are things you need to know. Things about David and about what your actions today set in motion. They walked to one of the black SUVs. The door was open, and inside Rachel could see it wasn't like a normal car. There were computers, communications equipment, things she couldn't even identify. This was like something out of a spy movie. General Hartwell climbed in after them, his tall frame filling the space. Up close, Rachel could see the details of his uniform, the ribbons and medals that covered his chest. Each one probably had a story. Each one probably represented something important. This was a man who'd spent his life serving his country, and you could see it in every line on his face. He looked at Rachel for a long moment, studying her. Not in a mean way, more like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Ms. Chen, he said finally, I'm going to tell you a story, and after I tell you this story, you're going to understand why what you did today matters so much, why finding David matters so much. Are you ready to listen? Rachel nodded, not trusting her voice. The general settled back in his seat, his eyes distant like he was seeing something from a long time ago. 6 years ago, I was in Afghanistan, Kandahar province. I was a colonel then, leading a special operations unit. We were doing what we call hearts and minds work, trying to help the local communities, building relationships. It was dangerous work, but important work. He paused, his jaw tightening. September 14th. We were visiting a village, bringing medical supplies and food. 12 men in my unit, plus me. We'd been to this village before. We thought we knew the area. We thought we were safe. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. She knew where this was going. Nothing good ever followed words like, we thought we were safe. David was with us, the general continued. He was a combat engineer. Not the most glamorous job in the military, but one of the most important. His job was to identify threats. IEDs, booby traps, structural dangers. He was the best I'd ever seen. Had an instinct for danger that bordered on supernatural. The general's voice got quieter. We were walking through the village square. I was in front. David was about 20 feet behind me. And then he saw it, a wire, nearly invisible in the dust, connected to enough explosives to take out our entire unit and half the village. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. She could picture it so clearly. The dust, the heat, the sudden realization of danger. David didn't hesitate, the general said. He didn't call out a warning. There wasn't time. If that bomb went off where it was, we'd all die. So he ran forward, got between me and the explosives, and then he did something that still gives me nightmares. He triggered it early, on purpose. Threw himself into the blast zone and set it off before we got any closer. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. "The explosion was catastrophic," the general said. "But because David triggered it early and used his body to absorb some of the blast, the rest of us lived. All 12 of us, plus dozens of civilians in that village. David took the full force of it. Traumatic brain injury, lost his left leg below the knee. Shrapnel throughout his body. Burns over 40% of his body. By every medical standard, he should have died." The general's voice cracked. But he didn't die. He spent 2 years at Walter Reed Medical Center. I visited him every week. Every single week. Watched him go through surgery after surgery. Watched him learn to walk again with a prosthetic. Watched him fight through physical therapy that would have broken most men. He rubbed his face with his hands. And the whole time I saw what the trauma was doing to him mentally. The nightmares. The guilt. He kept saying he should have seen the wire sooner. Should have saved everyone without getting hurt. I kept telling him he was a hero. That he'd saved 13 lives. But he couldn't hear it. The PTSD was too strong. Rachel felt tears running down her face. She thought about David sitting against that wall, hollow eyes staring at nothing. Now she understood why. When David was finally discharged from Walter Reed, he was set up with VA care, the general said. He had a caseworker. He had benefits. He had everything the system could provide. And for a while, it seemed like he was going to be okay. He got an apartment. Started going to therapy. I stayed in touch with him. Checked in every few weeks. The general's expression darkened. And then, about 8 months ago, he disappeared. Just vanished. Stopped answering his phone. His caseworker couldn't find him. His apartment was abandoned. It was like he'd fallen through a crack in the earth. What happened? Rachel asked. We're still trying to figure that out, the general said. But from what we've pieced together, his caseworker quit, and his file got lost in the transfer. His benefits got suspended because of administrative errors. He missed appointments because nobody notified him properly. The system failed him in about a dozen different ways. And David, dealing with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injury, couldn't navigate the bureaucracy to fix it. The general's fist clenched. He ended up on the street, a Medal of Honor recipient, a man who saved 13 lives, and nobody noticed. Nobody cared. He became invisible. Rachel thought about all the people who'd walked past David that morning, including her almost. She'd nearly stepped over him without a second glance. I've had every resource I could access looking for him, the general said. Every contact, every favor I was owed, every database we could legally search. I had people checking homeless shelters. I had his photo distributed to VA hospitals. I was terrified we'd find him too late, that he'd be another veteran suicide statistic. He looked at Rachel with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. And then, 30 minutes ago, a call came into our veteran crisis hotline. Someone had witnessed something they thought we should know about. A woman had given a large amount of money to a homeless veteran. They'd managed to snap a photo of the veteran. Just one photo. And when that photo crossed my desk, the general's voice broke completely. He had to stop and compose himself. This powerful, decorated military leader struggling to hold it together. When I saw David's face, he said finally, I've never moved faster in my life. I told my driver to break every speed limit. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about procedure. I just needed to get to him before he disappeared again. Rachel understood now. The black SUVs, the urgency, the way everyone had mobilized so quickly. They'd been searching for David for 8 months, and her simple act of kindness had finally brought him home. You want to know why I ran a financial check on you? The general asked. Because I needed to know if you understood what you'd given away. If you'd just handed over some spare cash, that would have been nice, but you gave away everything. Every dollar you had. While facing eviction yourself. That's not just kindness, Ms. Chen, that's sacrifice. Rachel wiped her eyes. I just did what anyone should have done. But they didn't, the general said bluntly. How many people do you think walked past David this morning? Hundreds, probably. And I guarantee you weren't the only one who had money in their pocket. But you were the only one who stopped. The only one who saw him as a human being. The only one who sacrificed for him. He leaned forward. David saved 13 lives, including mine. He gave up his health, his future, his peace of mind to protect people he didn't even know. And today, when he needed saving, you were the one who stepped up. Do you understand the poetry in that? Rachel shook her head. I'm not anyone special. I'm just someone who's had a really hard year and knows what it feels like when nobody sees you. That's exactly what makes you special, the general said. You could have walked past him. You had every reason to, every justification. You're drowning yourself, but you chose to throw him a lifeline anyway. Lieutenant Morrison, who'd been quietly sitting to the side, spoke up. Ma'am, the general wanted you to know the full story because what happens next needs to make sense to you. We don't want you to think this is charity or pity. It's not. Rachel looked between them, confused. What happens next? The general pulled out his phone and showed her something. It was a news article just published. The headline read, Lost Hero Found. 4-star general's 8-month search ends thanks to woman's sacrifice. Rachel's eyes widened. How did they know already? Because I told them, the general said. I called 3 news agencies from the car on the way here. This story needs to be told. David's story needs to be told, and your part in it needs to be told. The country needs to see what real heroism looks like. Both his and yours. But I don't want to be in the news, Rachel said, panic rising. I just wanted to help him. I know, the general said gently. And you don't have to do any interviews if you don't want to. But the story is already out there. And with that story comes attention, a lot of attention. He showed her his phone again. The article already had thousands of shares. Comments were flooding in. News sites were picking it up. Her name was being mentioned. People were calling her a hero. This is too much, Rachel said, feeling overwhelmed. This is crazy. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who's about to be evicted because I gave away my rent money. The general and Lieutenant Morrison exchanged a look. The general nodded and Morrison pulled out a folder. About that, the general said. I made some calls while we were waiting for you. I have a lot of connections, Ms. Chen. A lot of people who owe me favors. And I cashed in some of those favors. Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Your eviction notice has been withdrawn. Your landlord received a payment this morning covering 3 months of rent. Your mother's medical bills have been paid in full. And there's a check here for $10,000 to help you get back on your feet. Rachel stared at the documents like they might bite her. What? No, I can't accept that. That's too much. It's not enough, the general said firmly. Not even close. But it's a start. And it's not charity, Ms. Chen. It's the country taking care of someone who took care of one of our own. That's how it's supposed to work. Rachel's hands were shaking. But I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted to help him. I know, the general said softly. That's exactly why you deserve help in return. The universe doesn't reward people who do good things expecting payment. It rewards people who do good things because it's who they are. Rachel thought about the woman in the parking lot, the one who'd said the universe balances things out. Maybe she'd been right after all. There's something else, the general said. Something I want to offer you. But I need you to think about it carefully before you answer. He pulled out another document. I'm launching a new program. A nationwide initiative to find and help lost veterans like David. Veterans who've fallen through the cracks. Who've been failed by the system. Who need someone to see them and fight for them. He handed her the document. I need someone to run the outreach component of this program. Someone who understands what it means to sacrifice. Someone who sees people for who they really are. Someone like you. Rachel's jaw dropped. You're offering me a job? A career, the general corrected. With full benefits, housing assistance, and a salary that will change your life. Starting as soon as you want. Rachel couldn't breathe. This morning she'd been facing homelessness. Now she was being offered a job by a 4-star general because she'd given away her last $1,000. I don't have any experience with this kind of work, she said weakly. You have the only experience that matters, the general said. You know how to see people who've become invisible. You know how to value human dignity over personal survival. That can't be taught, Miss Chen. That's who you are. Rachel looked out the window at David, who was now being carefully helped into an ambulance. He caught her eye and raised his hand in a small wave. Even from this distance, she could see his face was different. The emptiness was gone. Someone had found him. Someone had seen him. He mattered again. And somehow, impossibly, Rachel had been the one to make that happen. She looked back at the general. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. But know this. What you did today rippled out in ways you can't even imagine yet. You changed David's life. You reunited him with people who've been desperately searching for him, and you reminded all of us what true courage looks like." He stood to leave, then paused. "The universe balances things out, Miss Chen. It just doesn't always work on our timeline. Today it moved pretty fast." Rachel sat in that SUV for a long time after the general left, holding the documents in her shaking hands, trying to understand how her life had just completely changed in the span of 30 minutes. 3 hours later, Rachel found herself sitting in a private room at the VA hospital. She hadn't meant to come here. She'd actually driven home, planning to process everything that had happened. But when she'd gotten there, she couldn't make herself go inside. Her apartment felt too small for the size of what she was feeling. So she'd driven to the hospital instead, following the ambulance that had taken David. The nurse at the desk had recognized her immediately. News traveled fast, apparently. Within minutes, Lieutenant Morrison had appeared, looking only slightly surprised to see her there. "He's been asking for you," Morrison said simply. "Are you up for a visit?" Now Rachel sat in a chair beside David's hospital bed, watching as doctors and nurses moved efficiently around him. They'd cleaned him up, given him warm blankets, started an IV. His color was already better than it had been this morning, but his eyes still held that haunted look, like he couldn't quite believe any of this was real. "You came," he said when he noticed her. His voice was stronger now, less rough. "Yeah," Rachel said. "I know this is weird. I needed to make sure you were okay." David looked at her for a long moment. "You gave me everything you had. The nurses told me about your situation, about your eviction notice, about your mom." Rachel looked away, embarrassed. "It's fine. It all worked out. Because the general intervened," David said. "Not because the universe magically fixed things. He fixed things because of what you did, because of your sacrifice." A doctor came in, clipboard in hand. She smiled warmly at David. "Mr. Thompson, I've got your preliminary results back. I have to say, for someone who's been living on the streets for 8 months, you're in remarkably decent shape. Malnourished, yes. Dehydrated, definitely. But nothing that proper care can't fix." She glanced at Rachel, then back at David. "I understand you have quite a story. Both of you. The whole hospital is talking about it." After the doctor left, David was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Do you want to know the truth?" "About this morning?" Rachel nodded. David's hands clenched on the blanket. "I was planning to end it today. I had pills. Enough to do the job. I'd been carrying them around for weeks, working up the courage. Or the despair. Whichever came first." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "I was sitting there against that bank wall," David continued, his voice shaking, "thinking about how nobody would even notice I was gone, how I'd become so invisible that I might as well not exist. I'd saved 13 lives, and now I couldn't even save my own. Couldn't even figure out how to get food. Couldn't navigate the system that was supposed to help me. I was useless, broken." He looked at Rachel with tears in his eyes. "And then you stopped. You didn't just give me money. You talked to me. You said my name. You saw me as a person. For the first time in 8 months, someone looked at me like I mattered." Rachel was crying now too. "You do matter. You always mattered." "I know that now," David said. "But this morning, sitting on that cold concrete, I'd forgotten. Completely forgotten. And you reminded me. Before you even gave me the money, you reminded me that I was still human, still worth seeing." He wiped his eyes roughly. "When you handed me that cash, when you said I deserved better, something broke open inside me. Or maybe something came back together. I can't explain it. But suddenly I didn't want to take those pills anymore. I wanted to get food. I wanted to get warm. I wanted to try to live again." Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'm so glad you did." The door opened and General Hartwell walked in carrying a small box. He'd changed out of his dress uniform and into more casual military attire, but he still carried that air of command. "David," he said, his voice gentler than Rachel had heard it. "How are you feeling?" "Better, sir. A lot better." The general pulled up a chair on the other side of David's bed. He set the box down on the table. "I brought you something. Something that belongs to you." He opened the box and Rachel saw a flash of blue ribbon and a star-shaped medal. Her breath caught. She'd seen this before in movies and news coverage. The Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration. "You were awarded this 2 years ago," the general said. "At a ceremony you were too injured to attend in person. They brought it to you at Walter Reed. Do you remember?" David nodded slowly. "I remember. I was pretty out of it from the medications, but I remember." "When you disappeared," the general said, "this got stored with your personal effects. I've been holding on to it, hoping I'd get to give it back to you someday, and here we are." He carefully lifted the medal from the box. In the hospital lighting, it gleamed. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. A symbol of the worst day of David's life and the best thing he'd ever done, all wrapped up in one piece of metal and ribbon. "This medal," the general said, "represents the 13 lives you saved. My life. Lieutenant Ramirez's life. Sergeant Chen's life. All of them. We're all still here because you saw that wire and made an impossible choice in a split second." David stared at the medal, his expression complicated, pride and pain mixed together. "But I want you to understand something else," the general continued. "This medal also represents every day you've survived since then, every day you've fought with PTSD, every day you've pushed through pain that would break most people, every day you've tried to find your way back. That's heroism too, David. That's courage too." He carefully pinned the medal to David's hospital gown. It looked strange there, this symbol of military honor against the plain blue fabric, but it also looked right somehow. "You didn't lose this," the general said. "You didn't lose any of it. You just got lost for a while. And now you're found. We're going to make sure you stay found. I'm personally overseeing your care from now on. No more bureaucratic errors. No more falling through cracks. You're going to get everything you need, everything you deserve." "That's a promise." David touched the medal with shaking fingers. "I don't feel like I deserve this anymore. I feel like I failed. I ended up on the street, homeless, begging. That's not what heroes do." "That's exactly wrong," Rachel found herself saying. Both men looked at her in surprise. She hadn't meant to speak, but the words came out anyway. "Heroes are human. They struggle, they hurt, they sometimes lose their way. That doesn't make them less heroic. It makes them more real." She looked at David directly. "This morning, you were at your lowest point, and you were still kind to me when I almost tripped over you. You apologized for being in my way. Even when you had nothing, you were still thinking about other people. That's who you are." "The medal just proves what was already true." The general nodded approvingly. "She's right. Heroism isn't about being perfect. It's about getting back up every time you fall. And you're still getting back up, David. You're still here. You're still fighting. That counts." A nurse knocked and entered, carrying a tray of food. Real food. Warm soup, bread, fruit. David's eyes widened at the sight of it. "I'll leave you to eat," the general said, standing. "But I'll be back tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss. Your treatment plan, your benefits that need to be reinstated, housing, all of it. And Ms. Chen," he turned to Rachel, "I hope you're seriously considering my offer. We need people like you on our team." After he left, Rachel sat with David while he ate. He took small bites at first, like he was afraid the food might disappear. Like this might all be a dream. "Can I ask you something?" David said between bites. "Why me? Out of everyone you could have helped, why did you stop for me?" Rachel thought about it. "I almost didn't. I was so caught up in my own problems that I almost walked right past you. But then I saw your eyes, and I recognized something in them. The same thing I've been feeling for the past 6 months. That feeling of being invisible, of screaming for help but nobody hearing you," she smiled sadly. "And I thought, if I can't save myself right now, maybe I can save someone else. Maybe that will mean something. Maybe that will make all of this worth it." "It did," David said firmly. "It absolutely did. You saved my life, Rachel. Literally, I was going to take those pills tonight, and now I'm sitting here, eating warm soup with people who care about me. That's because of you." Rachel shook her head. "No, that's because the general never gave up looking for you. That's because people care about you. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You were the right person at the right time," David corrected. "There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The hospital room felt peaceful, safe. So different from the cold concrete of that bank wall. What are you going to do? David asked. About the general's job offer? Rachel sighed. I don't know. It feels too good to be true. Like maybe I'm dreaming. Like maybe I'm going to wake up and still be in my car outside the bank, trying to decide if I should give you the money. You're not dreaming, David said. This is real, and you deserve it. You deserve good things happening to you. Just like you told me I deserved better this morning. I'm scared, Rachel admitted. What if I'm not good at it? What if I fail? What if you're amazing at it? David countered. What if you change hundreds of lives? What if you find other people like me and bring them home too? Rachel thought about that. She thought about all the invisible people out there, all the people struggling, all the people who'd been failed by the systems that were supposed to protect them. She thought about having the power to actually help them, to actually make a difference. I think I'm going to say yes, she said quietly. I think I have to say yes. David smiled, really smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Good, the world needs more people like you. People who see. People who care. People who sacrifice. Lieutenant Morrison appeared in the doorway. Ms. Chen, the general asked me to give you this. She handed Rachel another folder. It's the formal job offer. Details about the position, salary, benefits, everything. He wants you to take your time reviewing it. But he hopes you'll start as soon as possible. We have a lot of work to do. Rachel took the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a salary that made her eyes water. Benefits that would cover her mom's ongoing care. A title that made her sound important. Director of Veteran Outreach Services. There's one more thing, Morrison said. The story has blown up. National news. Social media. Everyone's talking about what you did. The general is giving a press conference tomorrow at noon. He'd like you to be there. David, too, if he's feeling up to it. But it's completely optional for both of you. David and Rachel looked at each other. I'll do it if you do it, David said. We're in this together now, I guess. Rachel laughed, a real laugh, the first one in what felt like years. Yeah, I guess we are. After Morrison left, Rachel stood to go. It was getting late and David needed rest. Rachel, he said as she reached the door. Thank you for seeing me, for saving me, for reminding me that I matter. Rachel smiled through her tears. Thank you for letting me help you, for giving me something to believe in again, for showing me that doing the right thing still means something. As she walked out of the hospital into the cool evening air, Rachel felt different, lighter, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't even know was there and somehow impossibly it had lifted. She'd given away her last $1,000 this morning. She'd thought she was giving up her last hope. Instead, she'd found something much more valuable. Purpose. Meaning. Proof that kindness still mattered, that sacrifice still counted, that the universe really did balance things out, even if it took its time getting there. She pulled out her phone and called her mom. It was time to share some good news for once. Time to tell her that everything was going to be okay. Time to believe that herself. The press conference room was packed. Rachel stood backstage, her hands sweating, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd never been in front of cameras before. Never had dozens of reporters waiting to hear what she had to say. Never been called a hero by strangers on the internet. David stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his new dress uniform. The hospital had released him that morning with strict instructions and a comprehensive care plan. He was steady on his feet, but Rachel could see the nervousness in his eyes. This was a lot for both of them. You don't have to do this, Rachel whispered to him. If it's too much, we can leave right now.